I asked David Deutsch if it is permissible to kill militias in Russia if they work for a dictator.
Self-defense is the only valid justification for violence.
David Deutsch. I have a question. Solzhenitsyn said the following phrase in his book At the Gulag Archipelago.
And how we burned in the camps later, thinking, what would things have been like if every security operative, when he went out at night to make an arrest, had been uncertain whether he would return alive and had to say goodbye to his family? Or if, during periods of mass arrests, as for example in Leningrad, when they arrested a quarter of the entire city, people had not simply sat there in their lairs, paling with terror at every bang of the downstairs door and at every step on the staircase, but had understood they had nothing left to lose and had boldly set up in the downstairs hall an ambush of half a dozen people with axes, hammers, pokers, or whatever else was at hand. After all, you knew ahead of time that those blue caps were out at night for no good purpose, and you could be sure ahead of time that you'd be cracking the skull of a cutthroat. Or what about the Black Maria sitting out there on the street with one lonely chauffeur? What if it had been driven off or its tires spiked? The organs would very quickly have suffered a shortage of officers and transport, and, notwithstanding all of Stalin's thirst, the cursed machine would have ground to a halt. If. We didn't love freedom enough, and even more, we had no awareness of the real situation.
And I was recently talking with friends from Ukraine what we would do if lived in dictatorship Russia. And 1. Is setting recruiting stations on fire without causing any victims a form of self-defense? 2. What about setting fire to the property of oligarchs? 3. Or killing policemen and writing on Twitter?
We do this because our dictator left us no choice. We believe that without criticism of power, humanity is doomed to die. Because if the possible thermal death of the universe does not destroy us, then we will definitely die from unforeseen problems. And only Karl Popper's open society can prevent problems, because only it can generate infinite, non-parochial knowledge. This is your idea.
I refer the honorable gentleman to my answer a few moments ago. That argument contains the tiny, apparently insignificant, but actually fatal flaw of confusing Russian political institutions with British ones. Recognizing the difference between the Russia with Britain is precisely what the future depends on, and confusing the two serves to legitimize the Putinist ideology.
Difference is rule of law. Constitution. Criticism is allowed.
Well, yes, but a better term would be traditions. Especially political traditions in people's minds. I recommend Daniel Hannan's book, How We Invented Freedom, which begins by contrasting these traditions with those in Peru, where he spent much of his childhood. I have read part of this book. In it, Daniel explains why the European Union is bad, why Britain should leave the European Union, and how the Western world and its values differ from the non-Western world. The first value is the rule of law. The European Union violated this principle. They passed a law that they would not help banks in difficult times, and they themselves violated their own law by giving money, bailouts to banks to save them from destruction. The second value is personal freedom. Freedom to say what you like, to assemble in any configuration you choose with your fellow citizens, to buy and sell without hindrance, to dispose as you wish of your assets, to work for whom you please, and, conversely, to hire and fire as you will. And, for example, the European Union violated freedom to buy and sell without hindrance. The Food and Drug Administration agency should not exist. The third value is that the citizen should be represented in the government. The European Union violated this principle. The European Union influences the lives of citizens, but citizens don't have control over who sits in this union because of bureaucracy. The feedback loop is broken. What other traditions or institutions people with Western mindset have that others lack? Probably he means that in Western countries freedom of speech is so strong that they even allow to talk about separatism. And why not to do this if the proposal doesn't include the call for bloodshed? Why not to do this if in future humans will be able to solve territorial disputes with a better technology of mobile voting over blockchain or Neuralink-assisted brain merging? Do I believe that all dictatorships can be overthrown peacefully? No. Why? Because of the Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance. You can't tolerate intolerant people. So what? What was the mistake of Chinese students that were killed on Tiananmen Square? What was the mistake of Myanmar students whose body was cut in half by machine gun fire? The soldiers overheard their violent plans of seizing the main building. Maybe all what they had to do was to write on a poster, "We will not do any bloodshed. We are only pro-peaceful changes. We came here to peacefully discuss future. You cannot kill us for this." And where it is a talisman? Based on David Deutsch, I don't know.